Welcome to Parenthood Bites, the podcast where we explore life as a parent in tech. I'm your host, Chow, and I have over 15 years of experience in tech, and I'm also currently working as a career coach. I'm the proud mother of 3 incredible boys. In each episode, we have an inspiring guest who will share their remarkable story. You'll find their wisdom and insights both relatable and enriching, because after all, we're all in this parenting journey together. So grab your favorite drink, get cozy, and let's dive into today's episode. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 66 of Parenthood Bites. We're here today with JD, who is on episode 40, and Len, who is on episode 48. They both joined me recently on episode 63 to talk about how they help their kids navigate college and figure out a career. We're here today with them to talk about what it's like raising multiple kids and how they foster the relationship between the kids and between themselves with their kids. Hi, JD and Len. Welcome back. If you remember, JD and Len both have adult kids. Has your older kids given you any advice that have helped you with your younger kids?
For mine, no. Not really. I guess I look at it from this perspective. So my daughter was 15 when my mother passed away. My mother, her grandmother was very much involved a lot in their lives, helping them with stuff and, always being there at their events. And so when she passed away, both my wife and I worked. And so our brothers were like 10 and 12. And so we had to have her kind of, she could drive, help out a little bit more. But I didn't want her to worry too much about outside of that ask. Like I want her to maintain her independence and just experience her. And so for me, the kids would always, yeah, sure. If they saw one of their siblings acting up and they had experience, and they're like, here, I think this might be going on. That would be helpful. And sometimes my daughter would help bring that up. There was enough of an age gap between them where she had some experience that she could help suggest some things that were more relevant. Because I'm not in that generation, so I may not know the relevancy of some things. But yeah, no, they pretty much operated and did their things. They'd help each other out more than they'd necessarily come to me, which was nice to see. Like, you could rely on your siblings in this case.
I think for us, it was not what they taught us, but what we learned while he was growing up. Just the thing of, like I said, like letting go. You can't force him to be a certain. There was something about, I think it was like, if you guys remember the 7 Habits thing from a long time ago, and I heard one of those habits, and it was like really the thing about like letting them just be, letting your kids be. And I think I was seeing like him go through the same type of path I went through. Like I said, with the attention in school, the getting in trouble. He didn't get in trouble in the same way that I did. It was more that thing of just talking out of turn and things like that. You try to force them to go a certain path. And what happens is you end up creating this major tension between you and your kids, where like if you start talking about something like, oh, am I going to get lectured? You start hearing that type of thing. And then there's like that paradigm shift where you kind of realize that just some of the things you're making a mistake on with your older. And I think having all boys and having them 2.5 years apart, I started seeing what I was doing with him, with the middle one, and it started to change my approach with them. So I think the learning more wasn't what they did, but it was, as you saw, I think it's maturing even as a parent. Because it's easy for JD and I to say this stuff now. It's really easy to say it when they're in their mid-20s. But, when they're 7 years old and they're doing it, I would say more often than not, especially with the oldest, we handled it wrong when he was young. And it was just learning that.
Yeah, you're right. Each child's different, right? Yeah. So to your point, I had almost 5 years with my daughter before my son was born. And so I definitely learned on the fly. You have people who can help you. My parents were around and they could help provide guidance and say, here's what you should do and those sort of things. But as a new parent, you also think you know better than your own parents, which is also why kids think they know better than their parents. We all do it. We all assume better. And then as we get older, we learn the experience and we realize, yeah, they were right all along. But yeah, I agree. It was more of a learning. And I took the learnings I had from my daughter because there was a 4 or 5 year, I felt like I was relearning again the second child because there was such a gap and a different mentality, right? Like a boy and a girl. It's a big difference between the two. And then by the third child, I felt like it was moving along. To Len's point, it's always a learn on the fly. Even when they get in high school, I'm learning. First time in high school, I don't know what's going on. Like what I did back in high school, but this is different now. As a parent, you're approaching it differently. You now go to the parent-teacher conferences, and they're not talking about you being a horrible student. They're talking about your child.
About your son being a horrible student.
Or your kid's not showing up to school for some reason. Those aren't the issues. It's more about, now you're trying to figure out, oh, doing great here. Could do a little better. Needed to be more proactive, more active. And my middle son, we learned it late in 8th grade that he had a learning disability. which actually impacted him. And so when that was found out, that actually helped him through high school because the teachers knew with this learning disability, he needed more time to go through a test. So they give him extra time, spend a bit more time to read through it. He didn't have dyslexia. He had something called dysgraphia, which means it takes him a time to read and understand what he's reading at that point. So that's why they gave him extra time to do it. So it's helpful. But we learned that. And then, of course, we have our youngest son who's just flying through because he just wants to beat everybody. He became more self-independent, which was different too. Now he was just doing his own stuff. So each kid does, in a sense, give you something to think about and learn from. And like anything, everybody's personality is different. It's not as easy as just saying, but there's some commonalities you can still go through. But yeah, it's a challenge. And to Len's point, when he said with his first one, made some mistakes. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and I facetiously say, what? Like, yeah, did we? Yeah, but yeah, I'm sure there's things we could always do better. And that's true even in their current as adults. I'm sure there's things we could do better for them too.
But we do the best we can given what we have at that time.
Yeah, with what we know.
Yeah, and every kid is so different. It's like the way you raise this kid might be a little bit, you customize it a little bit for each kid, right?
Exactly.
Right, and how they react to a situation. You could have the same situation, all three could do different reactions to it.
And you hope they are, because you kind of want that.
Yeah.
You want them to be independent.
You could be cheering a kid on running track and he could just still get mad at you for no reason.
I was referring to that earlier about the pushing it.
My son actually did that.
Court games, and then having his son give him a look like, what?
You're like, I'm rooting for you.
That's one of my favorite stories for him.
Yeah.
I think that kind of sums up their relationship, to be honest. That is almost like the pin of, like that is probably encapsulates their relationship. It's always one of my favorite stories that he has.
I actually have it on video.
I know it's not. Yeah, it's like it's totally different, but I love it.
I have it on video, so someday I'll send it to you. You can see
literally on video.
I mean, I totally hear that because some days, right? I'm just like, hey, how's it going? And then it's like I said something really bad or something, and I'm like, I'm just.
It's always the middle one. Fucking middle child. I swear to God, my middle child
is the middle one too for you.
He is the one.
I thought it was just his face.
No, it's the middle one.
So it's always the middle child. I always say that middle child syndrome. It's true. It's true. I'm a middle child.
Just to remind everybody, you have two sisters, one older and one younger, right?
I just said I'm the middle child. If you're trying to allude to that, I already said that.
I just wanted to reiterate that. I just wanted to drive home the point.
Don't beat around the bush, dude. I just gave you the answer.
No, I just really wanted to make sure I said something. To be honest, I think it's you don't see it that much. To give him some credit, I never really saw him as a middle child. In that, I mean, I think there were differences between him and his dad and everything, but I don't think it was, maybe I just didn't also see it in that way. So I like to let him talk about it.
No, I mean, middle child's funny. The syndrome, middle child syndrome, they always talk about, right? Like, oh, you're always ignored. Because the first child is obviously the first child. And then you have the last one who's your baby, and that's always your baby, right? And so the middle child, you're in between. And so sometimes you feel like, oh, you're not getting as much focus. Not like I asked for any focus, to be honest with you. So from that standpoint, but
that's probably what I meant more.
Yeah, but
I would say both of our sons, I would say the middle ones had no problem putting themselves in the middle to make sure that they were seen. Like you said, that they're quote unquote ignored. They didn't allow themselves to be ignored. They were always trying to be front and center. Where I think our oldest were okay with just kind of being in the background and like, okay, we'll help out, we'll do this and that. But I think our middle ones definitely were like, no. Always had a little bit something. But I think that's the kind of the middle child syndrome that I think we talked about. Is that they kind of feel that they have to sort with their places.
I mean, I can go on about the difference between three children. Look at baby book.
Oh God.
Look at baby books. First baby book, fantastic, filled out everything. Second baby book, mostly filled out. Third baby book, oh, that's right, I forgot you have one.
We had one? Yeah, we didn't have one.
It's like, oh, so that's the point. It gets harder the more kids you have. It's not because you're ignoring them. You're just actually doing a lot more now. So you don't have the time you did like the first child versus the third child person.
So about like the middle child, how do you make sure they don't feel like a certain way? Like my son, I feel like when we talked to him about middle child syndrome, he didn't even know what it was. And we told him and he was like, oh, I don't feel that way. But to your point earlier, Len, when we do things, he wants to make sure he's there, right? Like I bought new luggage and I changed my code to be like my oldest son's birthday because that was the one that came to mind. I just remembered it. And my middle kid is like, oh, okay. So then the next one, I made sure to put his birthday there and he smiled. He did a slight smile. He didn't say anything, slight smile. And I was like, I messed up the first time.
Yeah. I don't think there's any way to get around it. I mean, I think it's just, I think even just in general, you guys brought up earlier, is that each one has to be treated independently. No matter what, they're going to compare each other. They're going to have the comparisons. And I think
it's their perception. Yeah, it's their perception.
Yeah, and I think it's reality though. I mean, they talk about it. They know that it's there, and I think parents sometimes try too hard. Oh no, I love you equally. It's like, yeah, of
I never
course,
tell them that.
no shit. But oh no, yeah, we always say the same thing. It's
I,
like, yeah, it just depends. Just
yeah,
if you shut
I
up, I'll
love
love you
that
more.
answer. If
yeah,
you're less
Um,
annoying today.
yeah. If you leave me alone, you're my
what do you
favorite.
got?
How about that?
Yeah, I've said that
I know you have.
dozens of times. Yeah, but I mean, I think that let them know that there's differences between right. They're not treated like with my middle son. He's been driven to want to make money, and so when it comes to what his career is and how he's going to handle it, I've told him my expectation of you is different than your brothers. You may see it as being higher, or they may have it easier, but you're being looked upon that way because you're different than them. Or even just in the personal relationships or girlfriends or whatever the case may be. It's like, no, I don't have the same expectation on any of you guys, and it's not lower or higher. It's just my expectation is my oldest son, he's not really driven for career. He likes his job and he can possibly want to change it, but it's not like he's majorly driven to work 60 hours or 70 hours and drive to make a lot of money. It's just not his personality. So I'm not going to expect that out of him. But then when the middle son is saying that he wants a house and he wants this car and he wants to do all these trips, I'm like, all right, well, then you're setting an expectation I'm going to try to help you with. But also even their shortcomings, like with each of them, they all have their strengths and weaknesses. And, good thing is that, and I know with JD's kids, it's the same way, is that they have a good enough relationship where they may screw with each other when it comes to it, but they each know, that, hey, James is the athlete and is the student. Luke's probably the smarter one. Of course, probably can get them all mad at me for saying what I just said, but
Yeah, pretty much. It's good. You go.
but again, it's not that I don't think it's not saying that Luke isn't a good athlete or Tina wasn't or whatever. It's just that when you start seeing that each one of them have their strengths. So I'm glad that the middle one will say that even though he did get to Berkeley, he didn't study, he didn't really do his homework, he didn't do anything like that, and he still graduated. But he'll say that his older brother's smarter than him, and he'll say it proudly. So even with his kids, like Luke may compete with his sister, but he's proud of him. I think that's probably the hardest thing to nurture is that, that the love between siblings, and the respect between them. And part of it, I think, as a parent is you don't pit them against each other. You don't try to compare them or whatever. You have them highlight that, know that you're different and you have strengths and weaknesses, but not as why aren't you doing what Ben's doing? Ben's not a good student, but he got to Berkeley. Could I expect that out of his younger brother? Again, no. I understand that his younger brother is different than him, just be as smart, but it's just different. So I think that type of nurturing is a big one, is making sure that you can highlight those differences between them, but not making a comparison or an expectation to each one of them.
Yeah, and I'd say, unlike previous generations, where depending on, let's be honest, the man worked and the woman stayed home, and, back in the 40s, 50s, 30s, 20, whatever.
Not an easy one.
Everything was just set up that way, right? And so sons were expected to take over after their father. Usually a lot of them have business, and they want them to go that route. They didn't really give them choices, per se. And that was a lot of the mentality back then, like, you follow me or you do what I want. They pushed them. And that's changed over, like, my generation, or our generation specifically. It wasn't so much that route. Like, my parents, they just wanted me to figure out what worked best for me and, go from there. And so I've learned that and continued that path. And to Len's point, it's really about not saying, oh, your sister's doing so much better. Now, interestingly enough, teachers would always say about my boys, they all went to the same high school at one point. They weren't together at the same high school at any point, because she was like 5 years older. But for the two of them, my boys, they'd always say they look like twins, which they don't, by the way. So it speaks volumes about the teacher's eyes. But they aren't twins. But they always assumed when my middle son was in a class that my youngest son had already taken, because he was more advanced in as far as academics went from a level standpoint, that he'd be the same. It's like, no, two totally different kids. And so as a parent, you try to keep everybody else from applying that sort of mentality when they're shared in a certain location. That can be the challenge a lot of times, is that the kids get this from outside voices, and it's not even from you. Like, you'll continue to drive them to understand you're unique. I don't care what your brother did. I don't care what your sister did, vice versa. It's more about, I just care. I always love this one too. This is a conversation I have a lot. It's like, they would be like, oh, well, this person did that. I don't care about person A. I don't know who they are first and foremost. I don't care what they did. All I'm asking is, what are you doing? Right? Because I just want them to focus on themselves and not, in today's society, there's so much more going on, right? It's going to be tougher because you got all these social media outlets. You have all the technologies now being applied in the schools. Like, they don't do books as much anymore. Now they want you to get iPads and use those to learn and so forth. And so they're keeping you in these technologies, which offer other avenues. And so it gets harder. And so it's more noise, I think, coming in. And so it's even more important in that case, just to continue to relay, like, look, don't worry about the outside noise, which is always hard to say because they have to develop that sort of vulnerability to it, but just keeping them separate to Len's point. Like that's how I looked at all of them. It's how we kind of operated. It was like, you're unique. These are your skills. To his point, my middle son, very athletic, super fast, can jump in any sport, pretty much succeed easily in any sport you put him in. For my other two, they're athletic. Maybe they don't succeed in all the sports immediately, but they could do well. But then you throw it into school, those two would take off in a heartbeat, and he wouldn't be. He can do it, but it would be a bit more challenging. And so just keeping them separate is important. And I think generationally that's been more focused. But yeah, I feel it's going to be tougher from next generations going on because the more we make available, harder it is to, not saying isolate them, but just to keep the heavy noise out that's really just static and not really helpful and not actually even realistic. Like it's just made up stuff. And how do you keep them from hearing that, maintaining that positive focus on themselves? So that I feel is a challenge.
But just all the media, like you said, I think even that, just people lying on it, saying either their academics or what they did or what they scored or how they actually achieved what they did. We all know that half of them are lying or exaggerating or, just not being transparent about how they got there. That's one that I'm kind of thankful that we never really had to deal with. That I think, like your son said, you're going to have to deal with is that there's just so much out there, that silo and also that bubble of how they think the world is supposed to be. It's like, it doesn't really work that way in real life. But to JD's point, one of the things I always thought was easy was that my sons are all very much alike in terms of just personality. Everything about what they do is very much aligned. And again, all being good at math, there was always that alignment where when they were going through school, oh, you scored this on your entrance exam. Oh, you must be a Scalero. We got that for both of our two younger kids. Oh, you had the top entrance exam score. You must be. But then there was one other thing, like, when they would go through, then you would hear the thing, the teachers like, yeah, I see, he seems to be a lot like Dominic, or he seems to be a lot like Ben, or that type of thing. So we would get that in. And again, it's sometimes hard because it's like, well, no, I don't want to talk about my older one. I want to talk about him. I don't want you just to say, oh, well, if Ben's in this class, he must be like Dominic, so we could treat him this way. I'm like, no, I want you to treat my other sons as an individual. And that's sometimes and especially because my sons actually do look fairly alike, especially the oldest and the youngest. Like, if you look at their passports, it's crazy. Like, they can switch passports at this age. It's starting to be at that point. But I mean, and then it's funny because the in the middle one can look like the youngest one. So it's just one of those weird things where it's just how it is with them. But there's a lot of times with that where you're like, no, as a parent, you're like, no, I want to treat them as individuals. So like I said, thankfully they were all, for me though, it was easy because again, their interests were the same. And there was no saying that you're not as smart as your oldest brother. Yeah, he's very smart. So if you're not as smart as him, I think they knew relative that they were still smarter than the average, but it was never a big gap between them, which I think was the one thing that made it also easy, is that one was way different, not into STEM stuff or not into video games or just had a different focus. I think that would have been a challenge, but thankfully for us, to make it easier, and it kind of worked out that they all have the same interests. But there was something that we did, it just happened organically too. So it's something that I think that we did as parents, or that we nurtured aside from the relationship part. But yeah, they luckily, or easy for us, was that they were kind of all very similar. And they're all still very close in terms of the relationship wise.
But it sounds like one of the key things that you both actually didn't do that's really powerful is that you didn't compare them with each other. You compared them with themselves, right? Or that's kind of what I'm trying to push them of like, okay, maybe you run the mile, you just beat your own score. If that's what you want, you beat your own score. You don't worry about your brother's score or anything like that. And what you both said about like teachers comparing and stuff, that's a really good perspective for me to hear because my son, he has a Spanish teacher that his brother had last year. And I'm like, oh, does your teacher know your brothers? Just offhandedly, I was like, oh, he's like, no. And I'm not telling her. And I was like, oh, okay. But I didn't think much about it. Now I realize like, oh, of course, because he does not want to be compared with his brother. Yeah. And I think it's interesting because my kids kind of don't look that much alike. If they're, not next to each other and stuff, you probably wouldn't know they're brothers. And I think they like that because they want to have their own identity. And I didn't really think about that. But given this perspective, I realized like, oh, they're probably used to when people know they're brothers, then they start comparing. And I do see that like in Taekwondo where they all are there together. So a teacher will be like, oh, well, your brother did this. And it's like, wait, so I do see a little bit of that there, but because they're in it together. That's a really great point. So what would you say was like the hardest age for you? And just I'm sure every kid was different, but like in general, would you say like middle school, high school? I hear from other people middle school is hardest, but I don't know. I'm just curious your perspectives.
I've always said, especially for the boys, puberty. When that change started happening, I think it was the biggest shift for both of us. I think I said this last time when we talked, that they went from being mama's boys and being that to more gravitating towards me. And then the personality changed, just everything that comes to puberty for boys. I mean, I dealt with girls just in respect of my nieces, and I saw that change, and I saw like the conflicts they would have with their mom. But I definitely think, in my opinion, like just it's such a major shift I mean, of course, we all know the changes that puberty hits for everyone. And so it's kind of obvious, but how to deal with them. But again, it's just like the relationship change was huge for us. That's all in my house. And it just seemed like we noticed little things like the appetite increase. Now they wanted more meat. Like before, it was like they didn't care if they had steak. They were fine with macaroni and cheese. And I was like, we have steak, just little things like that you start noticing when they're at that level. Then, of course, there's just you need to shower more.
It's a little stinky in here.
That type of thing. You need to pay attention a little more to that. Well, it's like with sports. It's like, with sports, sometimes they wouldn't really care that much. You're like, no, dude, you've got to take a shower after practice. Just little things like that. But again, also the relationship changes where, like I said, you saw this shift where they'll always be mama's boys, to be honest. They're always going to be their mom's sons. But I think in terms of the reliance on wanting to be like you, be like, I think, the same sex parent, it just kind of leans that way. I think, they're looking for that guidance from you. And as much as I loved it, it's also it's scary, because you're trying to teach them how to be an adult, how to be a man, or whatever. But I thought that was the biggest change, in terms of being a parent.
Yeah, I would say difficult time for me, slightly different. I think it comes down to who's the heavy in the family, meaning between the parents, who's the one that's most likely to create the most difficulty in their eyes, in the child's eyes. Like my wife, pushing them to get their school done, getting their grades done, right? There became more conflict for her in those cases, and I'd have to jump in. And some of that does definitely come to Len's point when puberty kicks in, because now, for some reason, they just think they know better at that point, right? Which isn't the case. But for me, for my perspective, like my mothers and daughters, they get along great. They also can become like really angry at each other, or, fight a lot. And so there are moments where that happened a lot for my wife and my daughter when she was in her teen years. So whether, the minute puberty hit, teen years came in. So it was high school, mostly high school for her. They'd have their challenges, and I'd be sort of the middleman to try and help out and defend the wife. I wasn't just a pushover, Len. I know what you're thinking.
Well, what?
It was in your eyes. I could see it. It was in his eyes. He knows it. He knows he was going to say it.
He's like, I didn't say anything.
And then for my boys, for the boys, similar. I mean, things changed. They started doing more, more athletics, wanted to just play more with their friends, less, connected with the family per se. So it was interesting to see sort of the development between them as far as, how they grow and how they sort of become more combative. But my sons and I, because they love to game a lot, and because obviously I worked at Sony PlayStation all those years and everything, they got to experience a lot from that end. There would be times where I know it, they wouldn't be doing their homework, and I'd literally cut the internet off. And then you'd hear them suddenly, or they wouldn't go to bed. They were supposed to go to bed. This is like when they're 15, 16, they should be going to bed because, it's 10 o'clock at night. They don't need to be up but I'd cut the internet off. And then you hear them scramble. And then the next morning, you're like, were you on the internet? Yeah. So, trying to find ways around it. They're trying to avoid what they're supposed to do. And some challenges would be there. But I'd say, definitely the teen years, to Len's point. I mean, once you hit puberty, that's pretty much when it starts. Just like when you're a baby, terrible 2s and 3s, right? Those are when they start really pushing you a bit more. Yeah. And when they get to teen years, they're more, now they start to think they know more and that they have a better sense of things. And so it creates a little bit more combat, a little bit more pushing, but overall, to Len's point, like my boys, they love their mother, so they'll do whatever she wants. I mean, they'd put me in a home if she asked them to, so it's not a problem there. But, but again, like I said, to me, it felt like more whoever was the one that was pushing the hardest was the one they were combating with at the time. So
that's true. I agree with that. I started to set a timer on the router at like 12:30, cut off. Just turn off from 12:30 until like 3, just so that they would get to him. My favorite story with that, would tell him it was like 1:30 in the morning before he had to go take his SATs, and I heard him laughing, and I'm like, I kind of have a loud voice. I don't know if you can tell by the mic and everything, but I was like, hey, It's like, and he just got quiet. I'm like, remember you have your SATs in the morning. We have to leave at 7. He's like, oh yeah, I forgot. So yeah, it's like that's a good point. I think that's a really good perspective because it is when who's the heavy on that, and I think that it became all on me because again with a lot of the issues that they had to deal with were more things that I could relate to. So I always just told her, Mom, at a certain point, I just want you to be supportive. You could be I don't want to say baby there because I don't think that's the right way of saying it, but you could just be the one there that they can just relax around. Yeah.
That's how my parents
Yeah.
were. My dad worked all day. My mom was home. So unfortunately, she got more of the brunt with us as teenagers just because she was the person telling you need to do this. But my dad came home and he'd heard from my mom anything. Suddenly, we'd all shape up really quick. And that would be the end of it. So
The fear of God.
and yeah, because if he got loud, he got loud. And you just, not that he ever like hit people, but it's more like you just had the fear because, oh yeah, he just had that presence about him. You're like, oh,
I feared that. I feared him, and he never. I mean, I know he would never hit me, but I'm just saying, I still was scared shitless of him. Totally respect him and know that if I needed help, I don't know how many times he bailed me out, but of course I was still scared while he was doing it, just because it's just it's just what it is. Yeah.
And it does sound like kind of, especially with boys, I guess, like they'll be closer to the dad and kind of those during that time because of interests and things like that. It's something I'm noticing too. And I'm kind of holding on to my youngest one while he's not either way. But I'm kind of like, I don't know how to deal with that. Like, do I have to go find a new set of hobbies? Like, how do your wives deal with that? Like sometimes they'll just be watching anime and stuff. And I'm just like, I'm not into that. There's like monsters and whatever. And it's not my thing. I'd rather watch like a romantic comedy or something, which they won't watch. Or like,
my wife watches K-dramas and everything, so she just
right. So how she just kind of immerses into her own thing?
I think again, not having a girl. There's also her friends, her sister, and my nieces. So there's always that outlet for her where whenever she wants to go do something, I'm like, bye. Like 100%.
Yeah.
Whenever she needs it, she needs that. I mean, I think not just that, but she also needs that escape because quite honestly, we can be really annoying and really overbearing and really loud and really obnoxious and just like, whatever stereotype you want to say of boys, we can do. And, as a husband, I recognize that. So yeah, if she wants a day out with her sister or whatever, it's 100%. But yeah, I think for moms, for my wife in particular, and probably for you, you have to find your own outlets. So yeah, there's going to have to be interests that you're going to have. Like, I said, like for her, K-dramas, K-pop, and just other things that she does, like with going out with her, like her set of friends and her sister. Yeah, it's kind of hard because, again, you start to feel that, like, that you're being left behind as they're growing older. So, yeah, she definitely went through that. So, unfortunately, I don't have an answer on how to deal with it.
It's finding other outlets, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And it sounds like what you both were saying, like, eventually they still hold their mom very dear and close to their heart, right? Like, that doesn't change. It's just kind of some of their hobbies and stuff might be different.
Well, his sons would give him up in a heartbeat for their mother, just like mine would. Yeah, heartbeat.
Oh, well, I don't even. Yeah, that's no question.
Oh yeah,
no question.
Not even a thought. Yeah. Like for my sons, when they got to college, if I'd say, "Hey, mom says hi" as a text, they'd suddenly call it.
Aw.
Because they made sure they had to call her. Because they want to talk to her, and they still do that today. They'll make sure to chat with her, and she's always been present in their life, just like yourself will be present in their life.
First, when they get home, things like that. Yeah.
So even though you may not be in their interests, you're still part of what they recognize with everything, right? And so even with whether it's sports, and you're just driving them there to their sports, or going to cheer them on at a game, and that's about the extent of your real communication for the next couple of years, because they then go do other stuff that you have no clue what that is. It makes a difference still. Because even for my boys, it's the same thing. They actually listen to a lot of music my wife likes, because when she drive them to school, she'd play her music because you're not going to get them. They just have to listen to it. So they have gotten some sort of understanding of 80s music that they, drive into too. So I think, to Len's point, yeah, you find something that you can do for the time you're going to have available more than likely, because they're going to want to just chat with their friends online or something else, and you'll have hours and be like, okay. But you'll have those moments where you'll do vacations or things, and those will still resonate. And then as they get older and they start dealing with the working world, then it becomes more of a, closeness again. So
that's true. Yeah, when my kids first started singing to my Backstreet Boys song, I was so happy. I was like, oh my God, they've actually been listening, like, and
Yeah, it's
that was
in
like
'em.
my dream. I was like, okay, let's sing the song together. And it was awesome.
Get them to do the dance now.
Yeah, that's
There
the
you go.
next step. I try to tell them about it and show them, and they're like, yeah, okay, mom.
My kids will kind of do some
Yeah, now
other
you're pushing it.
BTS dances, but they won't do it in public. They kind of know them. They definitely know the songs. And like, we went to see this group called 17 not that long ago, and like my younger son was like, I'll go, because he knows the music. And it's like, he's like, fuck, I actually know all these songs. So it was kind of funny, but it's like, he still wanted to go. So all right, and he enjoyed himself. So it was actually kind of cool. But yeah,
That's
there are
awesome.
some influential. You'll always have influence over your sons, no matter what. You will.
That's awesome to hear. Thank you both so much for taking the time to meet with me. And like, hopefully we'll get to talk again in the future. And for everyone listening, these are the Gen X guys. So make sure to look them up and listen to their podcast, because it's...
Do appreciate you inviting us once again. It was fantastic. I always enjoyed chatting with you. But yeah, thanks.
Of course. Thank you so much. And hope you have a great week ahead. Thank you both.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Parenthood Bites. We hope you found our episode informative and entertaining. If you're a parent in the tech world or know someone who is, we'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us at chow@parenthoodbites.co, and we'll be thrilled to add your experiences to our interviews. That's chow, CHIAO, @parenthoodbites.co. And to our potential sponsors out there, if you're a business or know of one that would like to support and partner with our podcast, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can also reach us at chow@parenthoodbites.co. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Until next time, take care and stay curious.